Once upon a time, there was a king who had a magnificent garden in his palace. This garden was filled with a variety of flowers and numerous trees bearing delicious fruits. However, the most astonishing thing in the garden was a special apple tree that bore golden apples. The king took special care of this tree. Whenever the apples ripened, guards were assigned to keep watch day and night to ensure no one could steal them. One day, the royal gardener counted the apples and discovered that one was missing. Panicked, he rushed to inform the king. The king immediately arrived at the garden and was shocked to see that despite such tight security, an apple had been stolen. He was furious and declared, "Whoever finds the thief will be rewarded handsomely." The king's eldest prince stepped forward and said, "Father, I will stand guard tonight and catch the thief." The king allowed him to do so. However, during the night, the prince fell asleep, and by morning, another golden apple was gone. The next night, the middle prince took on the challenge, but he too succumbed to sleep, and another apple vanished. Now, the king was deeply worried. The entire court was puzzled, unable to find a solution. That's when the youngest prince stepped forward and said, "Father, let me stand guard tonight. I will catch the thief." The king, doubtful, replied, "What can you do? Your elder brothers, who are wiser and stronger, have already failed." But the youngest prince pleaded, "Just give me one chance, father." Finally, the king agreed. That night, the youngest prince remained watchful, determined not to fall asleep. At the stroke of midnight, he saw something incredible, a magnificent golden bird flying toward the apple tree. The bird landed on a branch, plucked a golden apple with its beak, and was about to fly away. The prince swiftly aimed his bow and shot an arrow. The arrow missed the bird but struck one of its golden feathers, which fell to the ground. In the morning, the prince presented the golden feather to the king and narrated the entire incident. Seeing the feather, the king was amazed. If a single feather is so marvelous, imagine how extraordinary the entire bird must be. Someone must capture this golden bird and bring it to me. The eldest prince was the first to embark on the quest for the golden bird. As he traveled through a dense forest, he encountered a fox resting under a tree. Seeing the fox, the prince raised his bow, ready to shoot. But the fox cried out, "Prince, do not harm me. I can help you. If you follow my advice, your journey will be much easier. In the village ahead, you will find two inns. One will be grand and luxurious, while the other will be old and simple. Stay in the old one if you wish to succeed." The prince laughed and dismissed the fox, saying, "Go away. I don't need your advice." He continued his journey and eventually reached the village, where he found the two inns. The grand inn was lively, with music and dancing, while the old one was dull and worn. The prince chose the grand inn and soon forgot his mission entirely. When the eldest prince didn't return, the middle prince set off on the same quest. He too ignored the fox's advice, stayed in the grand inn, and lost his way. Now, it was the youngest prince's turn. He sought the king's permission and began his journey. In the forest, he too met the fox, but unlike his brothers, he listened carefully. "All right, I will follow your advice," he promised. The fox was delighted. "You are a wise young man. Since you have shown kindness, I will help you further." The fox extended its tail and said, "Sit on my tail, and I will take you quickly to the village." As soon as the prince sat down, the fox dashed through the air, reaching the village in no time. The prince followed the fox's advice and stayed in the old, and the next morning, the fox appeared again. "Now I will guide you to the castle where the golden bird is kept," it said. "The guards will all be asleep, so enter without fear. But remember, take the bird in its wooden cage. Do not touch the golden cage, or you will be in great trouble." The prince promised to do as instructed, and the fox led him to the castle. Upon entering, he found the golden bird sleeping in a plain wooden cage. He carefully picked it up, but then he noticed a dazzling golden cage nearby. "How can such a magnificent bird stay in this dull cage?" he thought. "It deserves the golden one." The moment he placed the bird into the golden cage, the bird let out a loud cry. The guards immediately woke up and captured the prince. He realized he had made a terrible mistake. What happens next? Will the prince escape? Will he find the golden bird the magical horse, and the princess? Find out in the next part of the story. The prince had been caught by the guards and was taken to the king, the ruler of the castle where the golden bird was kept. The king was furious. "Who gave you the audacity to come here and steal my bird?" he roared. The prince humbly bowed his head and truthfully explained everything. He told the king how golden apples were being stolen from his father's orchard and that this golden bird was a thief. The king thought for a moment before speaking in a serious tone. "I could punish you, but I will give you a chance. If you bring me the golden horse, I will give you the golden bird." The prince had no choice but to accept the challenge and set off on his journey. After traveling some distance through the forest, he met the same fox again. The fox smiled knowingly and said, "So, Prince, have you learned your lesson? Didn't I warn you not to touch the golden cage?" The prince, feeling ashamed, admitted, "You were right, dear fox, but now I must bring the golden horse to the king. Will you help me?" The fox chuckled. "That is what I like about you. You accept your mistakes. All right, I will help you." The fox then guided him to another grand castle where the golden horse was kept. In this palace, everyone will be asleep. There are 2 stables. One is simple, and the other is adorned with gold. You must take the horse from the simple stable. But be warned, do not put the golden saddle on it, or you will be in great trouble. The prince promised to follow the instructions this time. As the prince entered the palace, he saw that, indeed, all the guards were in a deep sleep. He quietly made his way to the stables and took the golden horse from the simple stable. But just then his eyes fell upon the magnificent golden saddle. How can such a magnificent horse have an ordinary saddle, he thought. The moment he placed the golden saddle on the horse neighed loudly. The guards immediately woke up and seized the prince. When he was presented before the king, the ruler was enraged. "How dare you try to steal my horse?" he thundered. Once again, the prince confessed the truth. The king pondered for a while and then said, "If you bring me the princess from the neighboring kingdom, I will give you the golden horse." The prince was now assigned an even greater challenge. The prince went back to the fox and narrated everything. The fox sighed deeply and said, "You are too naive, but this time you must listen to me completely." Then the fox explained, "You must go to the princess's palace. At night, everyone will be asleep. The princess will be in her chamber. You must quietly take her with you. But remember, if you let her say farewell to her parents, you will be in trouble." The prince nodded and set off. When the prince entered the palace, he saw that everyone was fast asleep. Then he saw the princess, so beautiful that he was mesmerized. Softly, he said, "Come with me. I have come to take you away." The princess looked into his eyes and saw his honesty. She agreed to go with him, but said, "If I leave without bidding farewell, my parents will be heartbroken. Just let me meet them once." The prince thought there would be no harm in it. But as soon as the princess went to see her parents, the entire palace was alerted. The guards woke up and captured the prince. Now, he stood before another furious king. "You came to steal my daughter?" the king bellowed. Once again, the prince spoke the truth. The king thought for a while and then said, "If you can pass through the path of burning swords unharmed, I will let my daughter go with you." The prince was terrified. How can that be possible? He thought. He ran back into the forest and found the fox again. The fox listened to him carefully and then smiled. "Do not fear. Just trust me." Then the fox chanted a spell and blew gently on the prince. "Now you can walk through the burning swords without being harmed," the fox declared. The prince took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and walked through the fiery swords. To his amazement, he passed through them without a single scratch. The king was greatly impressed. "You are truly brave. I give my daughter to you," he said. Now, the prince returned with the princess and presented her to the previous king. As promised, the king gave him the golden horse. Riding the golden horse, the prince then reached the king who had the golden bird. True to his word, that king handed over the bird. Now, the prince was finally heading home. He had everything: the golden bird, the golden horse, and the princess. But would his journey be that simple? Would his brothers betray him? Would he reach his father safely? What happens next? Stay tuned for the next part of the story. The prince was overjoyed with his success. He now had the golden bird, the golden horse, and the beautiful princess. As he journeyed back to his kingdom, he had no idea that his brothers were plotting against him. As the prince neared his homeland, his two elder brothers met him in the forest. Seeing them, the prince smiled and said, "Brothers, look, I have brought the golden bird for our father. Here is the golden horse, and this is the beautiful princess." But jealousy burned in the hearts of his brothers. They thought, if our younger brother returns to the palace with all these treasures, the king will surely make him the heir to the throne. We must do something. That night, while the prince was fast asleep, his brothers launched their attack. "We cannot let you live," the eldest brother said. They struck him unconscious and threw him into a deep well. Then, taking the golden bird, the golden horse, and the princess, they set off for the palace. Upon reaching the palace, the two brothers presented the treasures to the king. "Father, we have faced many hardships to bring you the golden bird, the golden horse, and this princess," they claimed. The king was delighted, but when he turned to the princess and asked, "Is this true?" she remained silent. She had realized that these two had betrayed the true hero, but she knew that was not the right time to speak. Meanwhile, the prince lay trapped in the deep well when once again his clever friend, the fox, came to his aid. "I told you before that you are too trusting," the fox laughed. "How will you escape now?" The prince sighed and said, "Forgive me, dear fox. I keep making mistakes." The fox smiled and replied, "But I cannot leave you helpless." She chanted a magical spell and leaped into the well. Within moments, she pulled the prince out. "Now go and take back what is rightfully yours." The prince rushed back to the palace. The moment he entered the royal court, everyone gasped in shock. The king, astonished, asked, "You are alive?" The prince then revealed the entire truth, how his brothers had betrayed him and thrown him into the well. Hearing this, the princess finally spoke up. "Yes, your majesty, he is the true heir. It was his wisdom and courage that won the golden bird, the golden horse, and me." The king was furious. He immediately ordered his two eldest sons to be banished from the kingdom. The prince was declared the rightful heir to the throne. He married the princess, and the golden bird brought prosperity and happiness to the entire kingdom. And so, truth and honesty triumphed in the end. The end.